Have you ever stopped to think about the true spiritual power of salt? What you use to season your food may carry deep meanings beyond our everyday understanding. Salt, mentioned many times in the Bible, holds a hidden truth that few are aware of. But are we ready to understand its role in divine covenants and consecration rituals? Contrary to what many might think, salt carries a biblical symbolism that goes far beyond its practical use. In this video, we will uncover what the Bible really reveals about salt. As you discover the meaning behind this element, you'll realize how it can directly impact your spiritual life, bringing purification, preservation of faith, and even protection against evil influences. And believe me, these lessons are more relevant today than you might imagine. Are you ready to discover what salt truly represents in your relationship with God? Salt is mentioned in several passages of the Bible, and each mention carries a powerful biblical symbolism. In Leviticus 2:13, God instructs his people to season their offerings with salt, a clear symbol of covenant and spiritual purity. Similarly, in Matthew 5:13, Jesus says, "You are the salt of the earth." This short phrase reveals the crucial role of Christians in preserving faith and positively influencing the world. And let's not forget Colossians 4:6, which talks about our words being always seasoned with salt, an invitation to Christian wisdom in speaking and acting. In the cultural context of the time, salt was more than just a seasoning. It was an essential preservative used to keep food from spoiling. Spiritually, salt worked the same way, symbolizing the preservation of faith and holiness. In the Old Testament, salt repeatedly appears in consecration rituals and salt covenants, where the presence of salt symbolized an eternal commitment to God. This biblical symbolism reinforced the idea that just as salt preserves food, the divine covenant preserves God's people. In the Old Testament, the use of salt in sacrificial offerings played a fundamental role. Salt represented spiritual purity and the preservation of holiness. In a world where physical decay and decomposition were everyday realities, salt became a tangible symbol of the purity that God desired from his people. By seasoning their offerings with salt, the Israelites demonstrated their commitment to the divine covenant and the spiritual purity demanded by that covenant. Salt is much more than a physical symbol. It represents something much deeper in the spiritual realm. In Numbers 18:19, we see the mention of a covenant of salt, a perpetual alliance between God and his people. This covenant, which could not be broken, shows salt as an element that symbolizes eternity and faithfulness. When we talk about a divine covenant, salt acts as a spiritual seal, something that remains intact over time. This salt covenant continues to resonate in today's Christian practices, powerfully connecting the past with the present. The role of salt as a purifier and spiritual preservative transcends its common function. Spiritually, salt is an agent that purifies and keeps the essence of faith untouched. Just as salt preserves food from deterioration, it also symbolizes the preservation of Christian faith through generations. The spiritual purification it represents is directly tied to the need to maintain a clean Christian life, free from the impurities of the world. This reminds us to constantly revisit our spiritual practices to ensure that our faith remains unwavering. In Matthew 5:13, when Jesus calls his followers the salt of the earth, he is not just speaking about our influence, but about the importance of keeping our Christian wisdom alive. Being the salt of the earth means living in such a way that others can see the light of Christ through us. It represents a call to ensure that our faith does not lose its flavor, but that we use it to positively impact the lives of those around us. Just as salt gives flavor to food, our presence should bring spiritual flavor to the lives of everyone we encounter. There are many mysteries surrounding the use of salt in Christian traditions that have been forgotten or obscured over time. An interesting example is the use of salt in consecration rituals of sacred spaces. In various Christian traditions, salt is scattered to purify and consecrate environments, preparing them for worship and the divine presence. These rituals are often performed to ward off negative energies or evil forces, an act of faith that dates back to ancient times when salt was seen as an agent of spiritual purification. Theologically, salt has always played an important role, and some biblical scholars argue that its use goes far beyond what is visible on the surface. The Salt Covenant, for example, was not just a formal alliance, but a commitment to spiritual purity and constancy. According to different theological interpretations, salt itself represented incorruptibility, something that we as Christians should strive for. It symbolizes Christian wisdom that resists the world's temptations and corruptions, always preserving the integrity of faith. Furthermore, there is a widespread belief that salt plays a protective role in the spiritual world. Since biblical times, salt has been used as a barrier against evil, a kind of spiritual shield that protects those who live according to divine precepts. In passages like Matthew 5:13, this divine protection becomes evident, showing that those who are the salt of the earth also receive God's protection against evil forces. This idea of salt as spiritual protection continues to be relevant for many Christians today who seek consecration and the preservation of their souls against negative influences. Incorporating the spiritual meaning of salt into daily life is simpler than it seems. A Christian can start their mornings by remembering the importance of salt in the Bible, whether through prayer or meditation. For instance, you can use salt in small personal rituals, such as consecrating your home or blessing the entrance to your house with a small portion, symbolizing divine protection. These practices, though simple, carry a deep meaning of purification and preservation of faith, reinforcing your spiritual commitment. In contemporary Christian life, salt remains a symbol of purity, preservation, and commitment. Just as salt never loses its essential properties, Christians are called to maintain their spiritual integrity. Jesus' words in Matthew 5:13 are clear. We are the salt of the earth, and this implies living in a way that our actions and attitudes positively influence those around us. You can practice this by being a presence of wisdom and love in others' lives, showing how faith can illuminate even the darkest paths. A personal testimony can illustrate the power of this understanding. Imagine a moment when you felt spiritually weak and directionless. By remembering the symbolism of salt, you may have prayed for Christian wisdom, seeking spiritual purification. Putting these teachings into action can transform your life and those around you. Many Christians testify that a deep understanding of the Salt Covenant changed their perspective on life, reinforcing the importance of being constant in faith and actions. Throughout this video, we've seen that salt goes far beyond a simple seasoning in the kitchen. It carries profound spiritual symbolism. We've discussed its importance in divine covenants, consecration rituals, and how it represents the preservation of faith and spiritual purity. If you reflect on it, you'll see that salt is intrinsically linked to your Christian life, whether as a symbol of wisdom or as a tool of divine protection. The question that remains is, have you kept your spiritual saltiness intact? Now it's time to reflect on your own journey of faith. Have you been the salt of the earth, preserving your faith and positively impacting the lives of others? How can you apply the symbolism of salt in your daily life, whether in moments of prayer, spiritual practices, or in your interactions with others? Remember, salt is a constant reminder of the purity and divine protection that God offers to those who remain steadfast in their faith. If this content was useful to you, feel free to follow for more. Let's continue exploring together what the Bible teaches us about such profound themes and how they can practically transform our spiritual lives.